I don't know who Tony Danza is, but I've been pretty spot on the Westies. So, shall we see what else I can figure out? Listen, note number one is I did a lot of work for this one video because I rewatched the whole show. So if you can leave me a like, comment, subscribe, and share it with your fellow theorists. If for nothing else, at least to point out the stuff I probably missed. Note number two, I am aware that there's a video on YouTube with leaks from this season, but I won't be watching it and I won't be talking about it. So if you're expecting that, it's okay not to watch the video. I generally don't like leaks and I don't really search them out or watch them when I know they're available because I just enjoy watching the show or the film or the album or whatever it is in the way that the creators intended it. So yeah, I won't be talking about the leaks for this season. Note number three, meet my cactus. It does not have a name yet. I was thinking about Petunia, but also that reminds me of something from Harry Potter I can't put my finger on. Is it the car? I can't remember, but I don't think it's a Petunia. I'm thinking about maybe James from Wonder Boys or Theo. I think it looks like a Theo. What do you think? What should I call my cactus? Also, by the way, it looks a little mistreated. Like, this is the whole vase. Like, it's a big vase for a cactus. And it looks a little mistreated because when I was abroad, when I was out of the country, I left it to the care of my brother. And it wasn't a good call. But now I'm back and I'm taking care of it. And hopefully it will grow healthy. It's already growing pretty healthy. But yeah, what should I name it? So, this episode. It was pretty obvious that Helga was going to show up, and it was pretty obvious that the Westies weren't actually the killers, and probably haven't killed Dudenoff either, and we find out this episode that they didn't. The way that they play this out with Dudenoff arranging his own death is a little convoluted, but it's okay. The thing that I noticed in my rewatch of all the seasons, which I will be discussing later, is that the killers are always very innocent looking people. No one would have suspected Jen until the very last moment. No one would have suspected Becky until the very last moment. And no one would have suspected the producers. Maybe someone did. I didn't. So what I'm thinking for this season is anyone who we already thought was a suspect didn't do it. Anyone who looks guilty of something, like Bev Mellon or Glen now, didn't do it. And I will further explain this throughout the video. But the way that I was arguing that the sisters weren't the killers, that the Westies weren't the killers, wasn't because there wasn't evidence against them. Clearly there was evidence pointing to the possibility that both the sisters and the Westies could be the killers. But the way you can figure out that they aren't is with the logistics of the show. And it's the same reason I think Glen isn't the killer, because we are getting this reveal at the end of episode 8, and we have 2 episodes to go, which I thought actually there's only 1 left, but there's 2 more left. So it makes it even more impossible for Glen to be the killer. Either he's going to wake up from his hospital bed and realize everything that is going on, escape the hospital, be this really big thing where at any minute he could be coming after the trio, or is just going to be in his bed and they're going to do the investigation around him with the people that know him or whatever. I don't think he is the killer, and having this very obvious clue that Sazz thought that he was dangerous is come on. It's too obvious. And there's 2 episodes left. No, he's not the killer. But before I go on, let me just explain you the structure of this video. I will talk about the episode 9, discuss it, break it down, discuss some theories. Then I will discuss the theory that Sazz is faking her own death because there were other clues in this episode that led me to believe that. And Even though I don't like this theory, it's at this point quite possible, and I'd like to discuss it further and just to try to logically figure out how she could have done this and all the different scenarios that this could have played out. Then I will discuss the thoughts I had during my rewatch of the whole show. Then I will just quickly point out all of the unanswered questions for season 4 so far, or still the ones that aren't answered, and it's a lot that they have to answer in the final 2 episodes, and I don't think they will answer all of them. Let's see. And finally, I will give you my quick predictions for next episode, which I think are very obvious, but let's see. But now for episode 9, let's quickly examine all of the suspects that the trio has thought were the killers. We have the Westies, the sisters, Bev Mellon, the writer, and now Glen. Stubbins. The Westies aren't it. The sisters aren't it. Bev Mellon could still be involved in this, and I will explore that later on, as well as Marshall. Glen, I don't think that is. So let's look at the title. In this episode, we have to do absolutely no research about what the film is about because they literally tell us what it is about. And it's about a bunch of people who don't know each other, who are in a lifeboat trying to survive. So it literally boils down to found family, which is one of my favorite tropes in TV, film, book ever. So I loved it. And I will, of course, watch the film when I have time. Well, what this is about is clearly the Westies. They are a group of weirdos who found each other and became a found family. Another thing related to the film titles that happen in this episode is actually important is Zach's backstory, because we learn from his conversation with Oliver about the wedding to Loretta that Zach and his wife renew their vows with weddings quite often. And I went back to look at the film titles and the episode these film titles are in, and they pretty much fit the story of the character, including Zach's. And this is something I hadn't noticed before, but Zach is the only one of the actors who has narrated an episode, and I think this will be relevant for later, because remember when I was talking about episode 4, the episode titled Stunt Double that was narrated by Glen, and remember me telling you that it was weird that he was narrating it, he was the title of the episode, and it would just be like a random cameo for one episode or maybe 2, that he probably had more significance for the plot, otherwise he wouldn't be a narrator. Well, it has more significance for the plot, so I think Zach does as well, and again, I'll be discussing it later. So, starting off episode 9, just the fact that the trio doesn't immediately go to Detective Williams tells me and the audience immediately that the Westies aren't guilty. Because why would they confront the possible killers without calling the police? And I mean, imagine if they were responsible for all of this and they just came into your apartment with a knife. Some of these choices that they are making really make no sense. But I mean, I also got to remember that in season 1, Charles literally knew that his girlfriend was possibly the killer and just still had a drink with her and almost died because she drugged him. So clearly the logic of the show is a little bit bended. My opinion on the reveal that Dudenoff offed himself and just gave the Westies the idea for the continuation of the scheme is that it is convoluted. If you've watched my previous videos, you know that I thought he had died a natural death and they just took advantage of the situation because it was their literal homes at stake. But this scenario just puts less guilt on the Westies and puts all the responsibility or most of it in Dudenoff, which, well, is convoluted because why couldn't Dudenoff had sold the apartments to the Westies for cheap? And then they wouldn't even have the trouble of inheriting them because I know that inheritance is complicated. He could have just sold them the apartments. Like, it's a property that he owns and he has the rights to sell. He could have sold the apartments. Why does he have to off himself and make them criminals? You know? And another thing why did they lie about Helga? It just feels like the writers were writing the episodes not knowing exactly how they would wrap everything up, because why lie about Helga being Christmas all the time's guy girlfriend when they could have just said she was a friend who was nuts and they distanced themselves from her? It's just creating drama where drama doesn't need to be created. Sometimes I enjoy it. I enjoy it when it makes sense. This time it didn't make sense, and I didn't like that aspect of it. Like, why lie about her being his girlfriend? It doesn't really make much sense. And I mean, it would make more sense if it was just him, and then the other ones are like, okay, whatever you say. But no, they just went along with it and called her his crazy ex anyway. I don't know, it's a bit weird. I didn't like that. But we get the answer to a question that Hammy was Helga's pet and she couldn't take him with her because no one else would accept a pig as a pet in the apartment. So that is explained. And I mean, it feels like she just has a pet pig just to increase the ham. You know, the pet pig and the ham on the bathtub really feel like they're just increasing the ham ratio on this show. But now we understand a little bit more of the plot, and they don't exactly confirm this because it's an accusation that comes from Helga, but they just don't deny it either. And we see the flashbacks and we can assume that the Westies are the ones responsible for the note and for the poisoning of Winnie and from the plot holes from season 1, which I don't know how like the super fans of Only Murders are going to feel about it, but I feel like they will be disappointed because making the characters they just introduced in season 4 explain the plot holes from season 1 makes me believe that they were just plot holes and they didn't have an overarching like scenario prepared for all of this. They just used the new characters to cover up the past plot holes. Isn't that how it feels a little bit? Tell me what you think, because it's how I felt. And at the beginning of the current season, we hear Oliver say that there hasn't been a power surge since they closed down the old incinerator. But we know that Dudenoff was incinerated back in season 1, or close to that time. So are we saying that the incinerator was closed off after that? Was it because of the Westies? Were the Westies responsible for closing it off, or for getting it closed off, or for putting the signs up that it's closed off? It's never explained. Because wouldn't that be a decision from the building? And wouldn't they like check the incinerator if they're closing it off? Would they really just like close it shut and not look back? Wouldn't there have to be a reason? And wouldn't they find Dudenoff's ashes and shoulder? Anyway, now the only thing that still connects Sazz to the Westies is the damn lockbox. Because at this point in time, we know almost everyone who knows the combination, or at least who knew it before Sazz was killed, and it is the Westies, Dudenoff, Helga, and Sazz. So who else has the code? Because one of those 4 had to spill the code. If it had been the Westies, they would know who has it, and they would know who went there to shoot Helga. If it was Dudenoff, we will never fucking know. If it was Helga, she would know as well. And if it was Sazz, well, why would Sazz give the combination of the apartment to anyone? She was just investigating it. She wasn't using it, right? Right? The most probable scenario is Dudenoff, because he was always inviting people around and being very generous and whatever. Whatever the connection is, one of those people have to know who else has the code, and 2 of them are dead. So we're f***ed, basically. But that's the only lasting connection between the Westies and the East Tower shenanigans, is who the hell else has the combination for the lockbox? And I'm thinking, logistically, if you're going to install a lockbox on your door of the apartment that you know, does the building have to know? Like, does the building management have to know that you're going to install a lockbox? Because I don't know how that works there, but if anyone else knows, and none of the people who have the code were the one who told them, the most probable person or group of people to know the lockbox and the lockbox combination would be the people that manage the building and building business. So Lester, Oscar's dad, the lady that replaced Bunny, right? Or more and more, it kind of points to Sazz really maybe faking her own death. Now about Glen. After all the Westy shenanigans is figured out, Ella comes back into the apartment and tells the trio that Sazz told her the following about Glen. He messed up pretty badly and was harassing her. He's dangerous and he's gonna be the death of me. And he apparently was working on Project Rankakama, which doesn't exist. And speaking of things that don't exist, have y'all seen the name of the next episode? Why would they go to such lengths to name films for every single episode, and then for episode 9, name a fake film? Only murders explain yourselves. But anyway, this means that Glen was the relationship that Sazz was trying to run away from, and possibly that was kind of motivating her retirement, which makes sense because if Glen was a protege and she couldn't teach him anymore because he was messing up for some reason, it makes sense that this would drive her into creating her Paradise school so she would be able to actually mentor people who wanted to be in the business and who would work hard and not mess up. It makes sense, okay? This aligns pretty neatly with the Paradise plotline. Now, Glen could not be the problem related to the film because Glen is only hired for the film later on, after Sazz's death and after the trio is investigating her death. So Glen can't be the problem related to the film. Glen can also not be the serious issue that Sazz was going to talk to Charles about, because why would that matter? You know, why would Sazz having troubles with Glen be a sensitive issue to Charles? No. Glen couldn't also be the other killer in the Arconia that Sazz was investigating and told Jen about, because Glen doesn't live in the Arconia, and not the East Tower, not the West Tower, so he couldn't be the other killer who was after Charles in the Arconia. So Glen has to be an entirely separate mystery from everything else that Trio is investigating, and now they're going to think he was the person responsible for all of this, but clearly he wasn't, otherwise he wouldn't be presented in the 8th episode. But this is a point that I actually noted when I was doing my rewatch. Every season has at least 3 to 5 different mysteries that they uncover as the season goes on. So, and some of them sometimes are related, sometimes are not related. So I think we should take this Glen revelation with a grain of salt, because it might be involved in everything that Sazz was investigating, but it might not be involved with whatever was happening at the Arconia and with Charles. But who is Glen? If we all remember the 4th episode, the episode where Glen is introduced, it's called The Stuntman. Now, The Stuntman is a film, as I've previously said, about a fugitive that hides on a movie set as a stuntman. So could this be in some way related to Glen's storyline? Could he be in trouble with the law or with criminals, or in some kind of way having someone after him or being in danger? This could be the reason why he's dangerous, because dangerous people are after him. And if Glen is involved in shady business or in some way running away from someone and hiding on these movie sets, if that really is happening, Sazz could have very easily come across that in her investigation, or could have just found out from having him as her protege. And my question here is, could this be the reason she was shot? because the people who are after him got to her first. This is far-fetched. I don't know that I think this would be way too convoluted, even more convoluted than the Westies business. So I'm saying no, but I still wanted to mention it because the episode titles cannot be in vain. Another hypothesis is that this is still related to the film, because I cannot get over the fact that when Glen sees Marshall, he recognizes him. Not only does he recognize Marshall, he recognizes the fact that he's wearing a fake beard, which means he had to have seen Marshall recently to know that he couldn't have grown a beard in the meantime. And moreover, not only does he recognize Marshall and know that it's a fake beard, he calls him Lassie. Why in the world would Glen call Marshall a Lassie? And in the same episode, he's shot. And I've seen this theory because someone commented on one of my videos, I'll put it here, that's the reason why Glen was shot, was because he recognized Marshall. And remember, Marshall is one of the people who narrates one of the episodes and doesn't seem to have a significant role yet. The same way that Glen didn't seem to have a significant role until he was shot, and now proven to have been the reason Sazz was quitting stunting. So let's go over once again these title episodes, how they relate to the particular narrator of that episode, and which episodes haven't become significant yet. First episode is narrated by Charles, and is about the film Once Upon a Time in the West, which is a revenge story. It's a revenge story for the main character's little brother. This will come back in something that I will mention after my rewatch, because I noticed a common aspect of these seasons in the way that they let us know in the previous season who the killer is going to be. And I think this is relevant, the revenge on the little brother arc. Then in episode 2 we have Sazz narrating, and I thought it was very weird that Sazz was narrating, given that the title of the episode is about pet cemeteries. But then I read a little bit about the movie, because again, I don't have time to watch it, and it's an interview-style documentary, which is basically what we see in episode 2. It's an interview-style documentary of Sazz. Then the third episode is narrated by Zach. It's narrated by Zach and is called Two for the Road. And this film, Two for the Road, is about a couple who is taking a road trip, I think through Italy, on their car, and they're reminiscing about all their trips before as a married couple. Now, this didn't make sense with the narrator until this episode, this current episode, where we find out that Zach and his wife have these recurrent weddings where they reminisce on their relationship. So the Two for the Road is clearly about Zach's relationship to his wife. Now my question is, how in the world is Zach's relationship to his wife related to the current mystery? And if we pay attention over the season, we realize that Zach has a lot more focus than the other ones. Zach is always struggling with the movie, like he doesn't want to make it from the very beginning, and Bev Mellon is the one who convinces him. And Zach seems to have a closer relationship to Bev Mellon than either Eva or Eugene. And then we see him on the phone talking shit about Oliver, and then he changes his mind, and then he's shot as well. Like, Zach seems more involved with the mystery than the rest of the actors. And the fact that he has his own episode, and the fact that only now we are understanding the significance of the title of the episode that he narrated, tells me that it will still come up. And if I had to bet who are the people in the film that are involved in all the mystery, it would be Zach, the writer, and Bev Mellon. Then in episode 4, we have Glen, which, as I've said in the beginning when I had that episode, it didn't seem to make sense that it would be a whole episode named after him and then he would have a minor role, but clearly he doesn't have a minor role. So it's starting to make sense. And episode 4 is titled The Stuntman, which again is about a movie where a fugitive hides on a set as a stuntman. And the 5th episode is Marshall's episode. And again, so far, he hasn't had a big role on the show, but I think he will. And this episode is titled Adaptation, which is a movie about a writer struggling to adapt the book to the screen, and ends up writing a story about his writer's block, and is a very meta movie that basically just makes the writer the main character of the film. And what I think is interesting about Marshall is this whole idea that he is faking it. Like, fake it till you make it, that he puts a beard on to emulate his favorite writer, which is the person who wrote Adaptation. And I like the idea of Adaptation because it's a movie about fiction and reality meeting and being hard to separate fiction from reality, which, by the way, is a theme in other films in this list. And Marshall is the one who points to the sisters' movies and makes them look suspects. And I've had another person in the comments say that the little tinsel thing kind of looks like something in their boots, and another person saying that kind of looks like something from the curtains from their movie. So could Marshall be the one who is trying to incriminate the sisters? And could Marshall be involved in whatever mystery problem is happening with the movie? I think so. As I said, I think Marshall, Zach, and Beth Mellon are involved. Then the 6th episode is narrated by the sisters, and it's called Blow Up, which was referenced in the 5th episode, actually, and it's about a photographer who accidentally photographs a crime and realizes it later. And the sisters have this aspect of voyeurism, of watching people's intimate lives without them knowing. And we have all the cameras in the Arconia and the film they are making and all that stuff. So once again, the title of the movie is related to the narrators of the episode. And then we have episode 7, Valley of the Dolls, which I found a very convoluted way to explain it, but actually someone commented a much more sensible explanation, which is Valley of the Dolls representing Charles's little sister and her friends, which I think actually makes sense. But the thing that I can't wrap my head around is, why is the episode narrated by the cop? What did I do? I was rewatching the previous seasons, and I noticed something that I will maybe further explain when I'm doing the recap of the show. But do y'all remember in season 1 when someone in the police force was obstructing the investigation and they deliberately didn't send certain things to analysis? Like, someone was stopping the investigation. And in season 1, we never learn who it is. Like, it's never explained who was putting a stop to the investigation because they didn't want maybe the Arconia to be looked into. And then in season 2, we find out that there's a dirty cop. But he doesn't seem to have the power to stop that investigation. So in my mind, I'm still thinking, who is involved? Who in the police is involved with something corrupt that would stop the investigation from season 1? The Westies didn't have any cop friends, so it has to be a completely separate reason from the Westies. And now we have a cop narrator, and I'm thinking, but I mean, it has to be completely different jurisdictions, right? Or am I wrong? Because I don't know how it works. Like, I know on a superficial level, but I don't know how it works. But my mind is thinking, why is the cop the narrator? Is this the cop who is responsible or involved in whoever is responsible for obstructing the investigation in season 1? That's where I'm thinking right now. Let me know your theories, because I know there must be stuff about this cop, because he's a narrator that came out of nowhere. And I mean, I know that has happened before, like Uma was a narrator as well in Bunny's season, but that made sense because Uma was her best friend. Who is the cop? And then the current episode, the film is Lifeboat, which is about a bunch of strangers getting together and trying to survive. And it's about found families, which is narrated by Dudenoff, which forms his own found family, so it makes total sense. Episode 9 is pissing me off because it's titled after a movie that doesn't exist. Does this mean that whatever is going to happen in the episode isn't real? Is it going to be like an hallucination episode with Glen? Like, what's going to happen is my question. And why is the title of the episode a movie that does not exist? In my mind, I'm thinking, who could be the narrator? And it would have to be Bev Mellon. Bev Mellon is too important not to have her own episode narration, right? Well, that's what I'm thinking. And then episode 10 is going to be narrated by the killer. So I guess we'll find out at the end of episode 9 or in episode 10. Now let's finally truly discuss how Sazz could have possibly faked her own death. That's how I feel discussing this hypothesis, because I really don't want this to be true. Okay, first scenario that I thought was she does this completely by herself. And in that case, she would have to go to the Dudenoff apartment after the sisters were there, set up like an automatic gun or something aimed at the place she knows she will be. Then she would have to go to the party, find an excuse to go upstairs, set herself up with all the fake blood, because by the way, we know from season 2, when Charles faked his own death in front of Becky, we know that it's not that hard to like fake all that stuff. So she would have to go to the apartment, position herself in the right place, get the shots in the fake blood, lay down, write the tapping on the floor, then get up. She would know where Charles keeps his cleaning stuff. She would clean everything, leave just a little bit of blood on the oven to tempt them, I guess. But then she would have to send something down the furnace chute with her own blood for the dog Gravy to be able to smell it. That's the thing. She wouldn't be able to use fake blood, right? She would have to use either her own blood in very, very much Mona Vanderwall coded, or she would have to use pig's blood or cow's blood or something that would allow the dog to smell it. And this is the thing. She would have to be incredibly meticulous in the way that she's planning her death to be able to anticipate something like this. Like, she would have to literally throw her own blood or cow or pig's blood down the chute to anticipate that a dog might smell it. And then she would either have to have had her parts surgically removed and replaced so she could use those parts, or she would have to have replicas. Now, I don't know how sophisticated the police is supposed to be in this show, because clearly sometimes they're very much idiots, but I think they would be able to tell by the serial number if they were replicas or not. So it wouldn't make sense that it were replicas. It would make sense that it had to be their parts. And we know, because people have been talking about, oh, why is it only her shoulder? But we know it's the 4 pieces because we saw the 4 pieces in the police investigation scene when they're taking them out of the furnace. So we know that all the 4 pieces we see in her apartment are in the furnace. So if she had them surgically removed, she either had to have done it before she faked her death or after, because the trio only finds it like a week later. And if she had done it before, the only period of time would be that year-long hiatus from the show that we have while they're preparing the play. That's the only time she could have done it and recovered, because she could have been out of touch with the trio and with Charles and whatever. But then it doesn't make sense that she was already at a point in the investigation that she knew all of this, because we know that she only seriously starts investigating this after Ben dies, because that's when she hears the chatter on the radio about people wanting Charles to die instead. So it doesn't make sense that she was already at such an advanced point of the investigation that she was doing this and preparing this fake death scenario in between season 2 and 3, even before she knew Ben was going to be killed and people would prefer Charles to be dead. Like, maybe I'm seeing this wrong, but in my mind it doesn't make sense. So if she had her parts surgically removed, she had to have done it after she faked her death. So in that week, that takes a trio to figure out what happened. And what this means is that she would still be in recovery. She wouldn't be able to move. Even if she had like new parts in, she would have to rest for a long time probably, which means that if she faked her own death, someone helped her. She couldn't have done it alone. So if someone helped her, it's also probable that she wouldn't need to like set up a gun. I don't even know if you can set up an automatic gun to like fire at a specific time. I'm gonna assume you can, for the theory. But anyway, if she faked her own death, she had to have help. So someone was probably firing the gun and aiming at her like parts with the fake blood and all, and probably either came to help her clean or to help her get out or something. And I'm thinking, okay, let's assume someone helped Sazz. Who could it be? It couldn't be Jen because she's in jail. Could it be Cookie? Could it be Joy? She's a makeup artist. Could it have been Glen? Or could she have had help because of Glen? Because if we take the metaphors from the movie title seriously, and if we take what Sazz told Helga seriously, and Glen really was involved in some shady shit, isn't it possible that Sazz told the police, and the police are the ones that are helping her fake her death in order to catch whoever is after her, after Glen, and like messed up in all of this business? Because if we take the idea of separate mysteries, it could be 1, the Westies, 2, the problem with the movie, and 3, Glen. So it would be 3 separate mysteries that just got so freaking convoluted that led to all of this. So if we're thinking that the police is helping Sazz fake her own death in order to escape whatever dangerous situation Glen was involving her in, it makes sense, all of the shenanigans with the police. It makes sense why they look so incompetent. It's because they are purposefully not investigating this because they actually know what happened. So Sazz's murder could have been a fake murder, but then the person taking out Glen would be the person who is actually after Glen. Now, what did Glen get himself involved to have a sniper trying to kill him? No clue. I really hope it's not that literal, that he's a fugitive hiding on a set. That would be insane. But it would be interesting if he really is involved in something shady. Because, I mean, it's Hollywood. And it could have been something to do with Marshall. Because Glen recognizing Marshall was not for nothing. It has to mean something. I think someone in my comments pointed out that Marshall could be police, and Glen, because he was messed up in all this stuff, knew who Marshall was, and maybe this is why he was shot, and maybe this is why he was shot in the place where they knew there was like something to protect him and he would be okay. There's a number of possibilities. The last one that I want to mention is if Marshall is involved in something shady, or if he owes someone money, could this be the poker crew? Listen, I know it's probably not going to go there, but it's still in my mind that Sazz and Charles were in this poker crew, and it's a bunch of crewmen and probably stunt people that probably Glen came to know as well. Glen, being Sazz's protege, she could have done the same for him as he did for Charles, tried to find him friends, get him to the poker game. Maybe he got involved with the wrong sort of people, and that's what led Sazz to think he's dangerous and want to run away, and that's what led Glen to be shot. Very far-fetched. I have my tinfoil hat on. But I think the most important point in the Sazz faked her on death theory is that if she removed all her parts to put them in incinerator, she's in a bed somewhere. She cannot be like walking around, so she couldn't be the person in her apartment in episode 1 and so on and so forth. And if the police is helping her fake her own death, maybe this could all make sense because then she could put duplicates there and it wouldn't matter because the police is in on it. But it also doesn't make sense because if she is in some kind of witness protection program, the general police, like the NY police, would not know about it. So I don't think she faked her own death. This is my stand right now. I don't think she faked her own death. I think Sazz is actually dead. Okay, let's move on to my rewatch of the whole show and the things I want to point out that could be relevant. The first thing that I noted was, and this is something that was a lot more prevalent in season 4, but the logic of the show is not the same logic as real life. Like for example, in season 4, how do the film crew know the outfits that the trio was wearing in episode 1? Because the super fans of the podcast didn't even exactly know what they looked like before they saw the trio. So clearly there were no images of them online. The first images that were of them online were at the end of season 1 with the whole bloody Mabel thing. So how did the film crew know the outfits they were wearing if they hadn't even talked to the trio before? This is point 1. Point 2, and I mentioned it in my last video, how do the actors get all of the evidence from season 1 to the murder wall? Because Mabel certainly didn't bring all that stuff, like she just brought stuff from season 4. So it also doesn't make sense. How do they have all those pictures? Like, how do they have a picture of of Jen playing the bassoon from the point of view where Charles is looking down on her from his apartment? And this is like a failure in logic, but it's the logic of the show. And this happens in season 1 as well that I noticed. The first time we see Sazz, she's wearing the exact same thing Charles is wearing. How would she know? And she often appears with a similar outfit. How would she know? And the joke is that they are such the same person that it just happens like instinctively, automatically. But one thing is to have the same style. Another thing is to wear the exact same clothes. So either this is the logic of the show and these are just things that happen like that in the show, or this is going to be relevant to the revelation that it's been happening all along. But I don't think it will, because if they were going to invest in this revelation that it's happening all along, why would the Westies be the ones who poisoned Winnie? You know, why would be season 4 characters the ones who were responsible for the plot hole in season 1? And also, in season 1, it's kind of implied that Charles and Sazz are not best buds, and it's just Sazz that thinks that way about Charles and just appears out of nowhere sometimes. But then over the course of the show, Sazz and Charles appear much closer, to the point where in season 3, Sazz is the one that helps Charles out with his whole Joy complicated situation. And then in season 4, we get all this emotional stuff, so clearly they must have gotten a lot closer since season 1. Why? Is it on purpose to make this season Sazz's death more significant? Why? Because they clearly weren't that close in season 1. And also, over the course of the show, Sazz, in more than once, insists on being his stunt double again, being his replacement for the play and stuff like that. So she was clearly interested in Charles, not just as a friendship, but as like a business opportunity. In fact, Sazz is the first person in season 1 to point out that Charles is about to be Tarantino'd, which means he's about to become really popular again because of the podcast. Sazz says this in season 1, kind of implying that there will be movie deals for him because of the podcast in season 1. So Sazz clearly wasn't just friends with Charles because he was Charles. Like she saw business opportunities in this friendship. And I want to point out just a fun little comment in season 1. I think it was very early on, like episode 2 or something, where they are considering one of the ladies that is neighbors to Tim Kono being his murderer. And Charles says, wouldn't be the first person to kill for real estate in New York. And I also noticed something because there have been fingers being pointed at Mabel before. But in season 1, she's using an Apple device, so she can't be the murderer. And another thing I noticed that I didn't remember was this prevalent is the hate on Charles starts from the very first podcast episode that is dropped. Like, one of the comments on the episode is literally hating on Charles. And I think that because we get a narration coming from inside the trio, and we never really get much perspective from the world around them, we don't really realize this, but Charles has to have done something in his past, because why is he hated by the public since the very first episode dropped? Why? Like, what did he do? Like, when people hate someone this much, to continuously, over years, hate on them, they had done something. Like, I imagine this kind of stuff being thrown at Shia LaBeouf kind of character. You know? What did Charles do? Because in the very first episode of the podcast, there's hate about him. What did he do that the public hates him so much? Is this something with Brazos? Did he like up something with Brazos that I'm not remembering? What did Charles do? Because remember that when Jen goes to visit Charles in season 4, she says specifically that Sazz told her there's another murder in the building, and they're after Charles. Another thing that I noticed is that from the very first season, Only Murders in the Building has like meta touches. It's always a little bit implied that the characters kind of know they are in a TV show, or there's like a touch of little meta references, because at the end of episode 6 in season 1, Charles says some line, and then we see Oliver saying, this would be a great line to end an episode, and the episode ends. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure that all of the references and hints and touches that we are getting in season 4 pointing to the idea that fiction and reality are blurring. I'm not sure that this is specifically about the mystery, or if it's just canon to the show, because it's been like that kind of since the beginning. It's always been a little too conscious. The show has always been a little bit too conscious about itself. You know what I mean? So the whole idea that we shouldn't trust what we see and that we should be careful not to mistake fiction for reality and all of that, is it relevant for the mystery, or is this just the show? And putting my tinfoil hat on, I have to mention the possibility that a case has been in the works for a while about someone in the Arconia. Because we never really find out who was putting a stop to the investigation in the Arconia in season 1. Like, we can assume that it was the cop from season 2, but we can't be sure. And it seems like the kind of stuff that would come from way above Detective Williams for her to not even risk investigating it and like sending the phone to the trio so like they would do it, and then the police would have to be forced to do something. And I'm thinking, if there's another murder in the building, and it could be the 6th Avenue slasher, or it could be someone else, but if there's another murder in the building, and there have been hints about this for years, isn't it possible that the feds or someone high up has been doing and building an investigation on this person for years and have been trying to get them to slip up, to catch them for years. And isn't it possible that they were afraid that the investigation into Team Kono would expose this person or would scare them away? And that's why they put a stop to it, or they forced the investigation to stop. Isn't it possible? And if so, could Marshall or someone else on the movie crew really be a police officer infiltrated to try to find this person, because they know that the filming is going to be in the Arconia, so it's perfect to infiltrate someone there? Is it possible that it's this convoluted and it goes back years before the show even started? Because that would actually be fun, and it would justify a lot of bullshit. Right? Does anyone have like tinfoil hat theories to add to this? And also, in all of the previous seasons, like, we see, or at least know, the murderer is present the season before. So like, in season 1, when Mabel is arrested for Bunny's murder, Becky is right there at the entrance. And then in season 2, we found out she did it. In season 2, when we see Ben falling on a stage, I don't remember if we see the producers, but we know they are there because it's their play. So they appear the season before they are found out. Now, at the end of season 3, there was a party with a lot of people present. And in my mind, I'm thinking, it's gotta be one of them. It's gotta be one of them. And the only person that makes sense to me, because, let me tell you who is there at the party that I can remember is there that might be relevant. We have a trio, which they didn't do it. Come on, people. We have Loretta, which no way she did it either. We have Howard. We have Sazz, and we have the rest of the Razzle Dazzle crew. We have Tobert, and we have Tiki. Now, I know that Tiki did not like Ben that much because Ben was an asshole to him, but he was still his brother. Tin foil theory, yes, but could it be Tiki? Because not behind everything, but be the person who is seeking revenge against Charles from the reference movie from episode 1. Could it be Tiki? Because it's gotta be more than one person responsible. Like, this is not just one person is behind all of these mysteries. Could it be Tiki? Another thing that pissed me off was Amy Schumer, because she literally said to Oliver's face, "Did we ever find out who poisoned Winnie?" Why? Why? Like, what did she know? And also, Amy Schumer is like in the movie business. What did she know? Did everyone know about the Dudenoff business, or was she just pointing out a plot hole and like just representing the writers of the show laughing at the audience like, haha, we know, you know? And Amy Schumer is the second person to mention the possibility of the podcast being adapted, this time to TV. And this would be around the time when Marshall was writing his script, because he started writing the script after season 1. And I mean, is this just another thing where it's just the logic of the show? Or is it relevant to the mystery why so many people see potential in this podcast to be adapted and why so many people are interested in it? Like, is it just one of those things where everyone knows something about the Arconia is not right and they just want people to get in there to film, to investigate, to get more attention to it? Like, am I paranoid at this point? Or why are there so many people interested in adapting that story to making a TV or a film? Because at that point in time, the beginning of season 2, it's 3 people. It's Sazz, knowing that this will be big on Hollywood. It's Amy Schumer wanting to make it a TV show, and it's Marshall, who is at that point writing the screenplay. And about Howard, I can understand if there's something hidden about how he gets his money and his life and whatever, but at this point in the show, I would see him more as a secret benefactor to the podcast because he's been supportive of the podcast since season 1. And he's really become kind of a fourth member of the trio, and he helps them so much. I don't know if it would make sense for him to be a secret antagonist, but I would be very into this idea that he's a secret benefactor, and that behind the scenes he supports the podcast so much, maybe helped it become more popular or something like that. I would be into that so much more than into the fact that Howard is this evil mastermind behind all of it. And now a point about missing characters. 2 nodes of people specifically. One is Oscar and his dad. Where's Oscar? I mean, supposedly his dad, who is the super of the building, is still in the building. So does Oscar come to visit him and just doesn't see Mabel? What happened to them? Because Oscar's father has some power in the building. Like, remember in season 1 when Oscar literally copied all of his father's keys to get into the apartment? Which means that his father does have the keys. And I'm paying attention to Oscar's father because someone commented that they could be responsible for some part of this or be involved in whatever the mystery in the Arconia is, or whoever the secret murderer in the Arconia is. And the second character family node is the Dimoses, because we know that the kid had that bracelet for a while but then was free because we see him in season 3. But what happened to the dad? Because we know he doesn't go to jail because he threatens Oliver, and then we find out that that is actually Oliver's son's biological father. What happened to them? And also, I really hope we see the Dimoses kid again, the deaf guy, because I really like him in the show. And he was there in season 3, and I loved him there in season 3. Please make him return in season 4, because Mabel needs a friend. And then there are also a lot of characters who have kind of secret histories with the Arconia. For example, Marv. Marv, do you remember Marv, the super fan from season 1 who turned out to be a mold inspector and knew about the passageways in the Arconia? Like, how many more characters have we met that have a secret history with the Arconia and are more relevant to the plot than we know? This is where I think the show is going. It's like, a random character, maybe it's the milk lady, maybe it's Lester, I don't know. It's gonna be the most innocent looking person on earth that is the murderer in the Arconia. And we're not going to see it coming until maybe the ending of the next episode or the middle end part of the final episode. But I think that in the end it's going to bottle down to the fact that in every season there are multiple mysteries. Some of them are related to the main mystery, some of them are not. And I think this is the thing with season 4 as well. They will be partially connected, but there could be several things going on at the same time, and we think it's all connected because, it's a murder mystery, so we want it to be all connected, but it won't be. Not everything that we're going to find out is going to be connected in the criminal sense to everything else. The Westies is clearly connected to Sazz because Sazz figured out what was going on, but is it really connected to the main mystery of why Sazz was dead? Not really, apart from where she was shot from. So I think this is the dynamic of the show. There are several mysteries, some of them are connected, some of them are not, or maybe just partially connected. And let's examine the mysteries in the previous seasons to demonstrate this. In season 1, there are 3 main mysteries. Zoe's death, which turned out to be kind of an accident, which was related to the jewelry business that was the other mystery. And then the other mystery, which was the bigger mystery, was Tim Kono's death, which turned out to be because of his crazy ex-girlfriend. And the jewelry business was kind of the reason why Jen murdered him, but in the end was really because she was a psycho. So 3 mysteries, partially connected, but the 2 minor mysteries are really not the cause for Tim Kono's death, because a normal person that saw a ring wouldn't kill him. So it's just Jen being a psycho. In season 3, we solve 5 major mysteries. Some are connected to each other, some are not. First one, the fact that Carol Delevingne is not rich. Second one, Rose Cooper is not Rose Cooper. Rose Cooper is Bunny's mother, and she's the one who painted the painting with Charles's dad, who was her lover, and the reason why she faked her own death was because she was in an abusive relationship and she had to leave. Third mystery, Dimas is Oliver's son's real father, not related to the plot at all, but is something that we find out. Fourth mystery, the original podcast that the trio was in love with, All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma, was fake because the supposed victim was Cindy's freaking assistant. And then fifth mystery, Becky was the killer. In season 3, there are 4 mysteries. 1, Loretta is Dickie's mother. 2, mother producer poisoned Ben. 3, son producer shoved Ben down the elevator shaft. And 4, there is not an actual ghost in the theater, it's just the old man living there. And in season 4, we have already uncovered some mysteries. The Westies' business is uncovered. Dudenoff's death is figured out. The whole business with the sisters knowing Dudenoff and all that stuff, uncovered, dealt with. But now, what we need to know is, what did Sazz know about the film and about Charles? Who is the murderer in the Arconia and potentially the same person who killed Sazz? Who shot Glen? So you see, there's already been a mystery uncovered that it's kind of related to the overall mystery, but not really that important to it. So I think this is how it's going to play out in the rest of the episodes. We will uncover more mysteries and figure out more of what is going on overall in the film and in the Arconia, but it might not be completely related to each other. They might be partially related, but still be separate mysteries. This is what I think so far. So now, unanswered questions from season 4. Number 1. Who was at Sazz's apartment when the trio went there to investigate? Because if Sazz is alive, probably Sazz. If the film crew people had something to do with it, probably Bev Mellon. Those are my 2 hypotheses. I would think probably Bev Mellon because I genuinely don't think that Sazz faked her own death. I will be very surprised if that's what happens. But yeah, I think maybe either Bev Mellon, or now that we know the relationship that Glen had with Sazz, maybe it was Glen that was at the apartment, because if he was her protege and she disappeared, he would have questions about it. And also, if he was her protege and she disappeared, he would be the first person to notice. Why didn't he say anything? And why didn't he say anything about the trio, about how much he knew Sazz? I think the show is pointing us towards the idea that he is responsible, but I'm not sure that's true. Because what if he was suspecting the trio, or if he was suspecting someone on the film, and that's why he wanted to do the film, to figure out who did this to Sazz, and to figure out if he was in danger as well, which clearly he is in danger. So I think there could be other logical reasons of why Glen didn't divulge his relationship with Sazz to the trio. Because as we also can see, the guy has paranoia issues. Like the rat thing, whether that is a callback to Ben or not, whether Glen is Ben or not, that man is paranoid as shit. So of course he wasn't going to trust anyone, and possibly was afraid for his life, and I mean, for a reason. So either Glen is behind this, which I don't think he is. He was at the apartment and he didn't tell the trio so they wouldn't suspect him. Or Glen is also a victim of the same person who killed Sazz and didn't know who to trust, and could potentially still be the person who was at Sazz's apartment back in episode 1. Some other unanswered questions are in Sazz's desk. We've already figured out a lot of the notes, but there are a few that are still unknown. I have in mind the note with a bunch of numbers where some of the numbers are crossed out. I've been thinking about this since the very first episode and I can't figure out what it is. Because first I thought it might be like floors in the Arconia, but I'm pretty sure the numbers go all the way up to 80, and the Arconia is like 40 floors, right? Or something like that. So it couldn't be the floors in the Arconia, because maybe she's trying to figure out which of the floors has the murderer. But it doesn't make sense, and I cannot figure out what those numbers are. But we also have the burn gel, we have the golf tournament, we have the old purse. There are still a few things that haven't been connected, and hopefully will in a following episode. Of course, another answered question is who is after Charles? Who was Sazz suspecting when she told Jen about all of this? Of course, we should assume that the person who is after Charles is the murderer who is still living in the building. It could also be someone from the film crew who lives in the building. This is a question that will get an answer, I hope, for sure, in the last episode. One question that bothers me to hell is why would Sazz use her last breath on this earth to write with her own blood the words tapping on the floor, and it just be a metaphor for Charles to start investigating, or just be like an emotional connection to Charles and Sazz's connected past? It's her last breath, it's her dying breath, and she's using it to write tap in for it just to mean that Charles needs to figure out. No. When you're dying, and you write in your own blood on the floor? On the floor? You write something about who did this to you. You write something about your killer. Why do we have to know that Charles and Sazz share a blood type? That has to be relevant. Is this something to do with the blood they found on, like, Charles's kitchen floor? Is this something about their past in Brazos? Why do we have to know they have the same blood type? Are they siblings? I'm sorry, are they siblings? Because why do they... And it's like Oneg, isn't it? It's like Oneg, the rarest freaking blood type in existence. Why do they have it? And are they siblings? Something that drove me insane that no one paid any attention to is why in the world does Charles know the Portuguese flag so well? Because it's not just like, oh, it's the Portuguese flag. No, he describes it. He says, I would know this thing and this thing and this thing anywhere. Why in the world does he know the Portuguese flag so well? Like, I've said this before, I'm Portuguese, but I'm well aware that in the United States, the most automatic answer to Portuguese is the Brazilian flag, because they share a continent, and Brazil is so much bigger than Portugal, and they speak Portuguese. So whenever I see anyone from the States talking about Portuguese, they refer to Brazil, which is a completely different flag. So how does Charles know the Portuguese flag so well? That's stuck in my brain and hasn't left yet, because I think that's a freaking clue, and if it isn't for this season, it's going to be for the next, because it's just too specific. The question that everyone hates is Glen Ben. I wouldn't mind if that was true. It would be very convoluted, but the kind of convoluted that I would enjoy. So, we'll see. And something else that has been bothering me is, why did Glen put a real bottle amongst the fake bottles when they were doing the funeral for Sazz? Because we know that Glen prepared the box, and we know that Glen took out the real bottle and used it to hit Charles. And he couldn't possibly be wanting to murder Charles because it's a bottle. It's not gonna kill you. And especially because it wasn't that, like, it's not gonna kill you. It's just a bottle. It will leave you with a bruise. Like our cranium, our bone, our skull, like our skull is stronger than that. And watching that scene, it just kind of made me think that the only reason he put the bottle there was to stir up some shit with the other people and make a proper funeral for Sazz. And why would he want to make a proper funeral for Sazz if he didn't like her and if he tried to kill her? Because Now knowing that he was her protege makes sense that he would be double invested in trying to give her a proper funeral. But it doesn't make sense that he would want to kill her or harm her in any way. And also, now that I'm discussing this, when Helga tells the trio that Sazz said that Glen would be the death of her, isn't this an expression that parents use to talk about their kids? Like, you're gonna be the death of me, you know? Kind of like, you're gonna ruin my life, but not really, I'm just exaggerating. I don't know, something about it was fishy. And we still don't know that much about this Helga person, you know? I thought it was a bit suspicious that she got into Dudenoff's life, knowing all the references that he knows, playing the same game that he plays. It's a bit convenient, isn't it? Another unanswered question is, how did Bev find Paradise? Because we never really find out. Like, we just assume that she's there investigating because of the voicemail that Sazz left her. But how did she find out about that place? Because Charles remembered a past memory he shared with Sazz. Was Sazz this open about creating Paradise that everyone like around Hollywood knew? How did Bev know about that place? This is why I think she's suspicious, and she should be the narrator of episode 9, and she's probably involved in whatever is going on in the film mystery aspect of it. Bev, Marshall, and Zach. That's my opinion. And of course, another question is, why did Glen know Marshall? Why did he know he had a fake beard on? Why did he call him Lassie? Who shot Glen? Another thing that has been bothering me to shit is, why were the Westies' windows closed off? Like, why were the West Tower windows closed off? And why did the Westies keep them closed off if they were so easy to pry open? And why was Dudenoff always with his, shutters closed? Was he aware that there was another murderer in the building? Was he aware that he was potentially facing the window of that person? Was he aware that maybe people had cameras around surveilling other people? Was he paranoid about this? Why were his windows always closed? Or was this just after he was incinerated? Like, when Charles is saying that his windows are always closed, but sometimes there are lights on. Was this just since season 1? Did he never notice that apartment before season 1? And about the murder wall, why on earth is the Jules paper so freaking big? In every shot of that freaking murder wall, the Jules paper just stands out. Like, it's a huge paper. It's in the middle of the shot or close to the middle. The actors are not in front of it. It has so much protagonism, that freaking Jules paper. Why were the Jules from season 1 that relevant? That they were in that huge paper in the freaking murder wall. And last significant question, why on earth was the cop the narrator of episode 8? No, wait, episode 7. The man literally appeared in 2 shots at the end. Why was it a revelation that this husband, this cop, was the narrator? And how did Howard get his number? I've just looked at the screen where I'm recording, and it's been 2 hours. I need to go eat lunch, so let's talk about predictions for the next episode. 1, I'm hoping the narrator is Bev Mellon. 2, there will definitely be wedding shenanigans with Oliver, which I will detest, but I will adore seeing Loretta being adorable as usual. Glen either has to wake up and escape, wake up and explain everything, or not wake up and everything will be investigated around him with the people around him. And hopefully, the trio finally talks to Detective Williams and tells her all the shit that is going on. But low hopes for that, very low hopes for that. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, comment your theories and... The hell's that noise? Comment your theories and what you think might be going on. If you have knowledge of what's coming in the following episodes from these leaks, maybe just put a spoiler alert in the comment or something like that so I don't read it. Because I don't want to know. I want to watch it as the creators intended. Yeah, like, comment, share. Share with fellow delusional people, I guess. I'm going to take this time to just say that I will be doing some videos on other TV shows like Heartstopper, Silo, probably Arcane, Squid Game, and all that stuff. Let me know in the comments if there's a show that is coming out soon and you want me to cover, maybe a murder mystery or anything else. And also, don't forget to give your suggestions of what I should name my little baby right here. And yeah, that's it, people. Goodbye, my little peace petals and peanut butter sandwiches. Have a good day and go watch Agatha All Along because that's gonna be fun for sure. And to all the people who've been hating on that show because it's filled with a bunch of lesbian witches, mind your own damn business.